Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sustainable Tech Leader podcast. Today, I'm joined by John Durrant, co founder of Human Centric Engineering. At my last company, I had the chance to work with John and his team, and they did a great job of helping us understand our tech org through extensive interviews and surveys with the entire team. They gave us a clear strategy and tangible actions to improve our team topology setup. John brings a unique perspective, seeing software engineering not just as a technical challenge, but as a psycho-social technical one, where people and culture just as much as code. He's led engineering teams at scale, including head of engineering at Eagle Eye Solutions and Third Bridge, and now he helps organizations design healthier, high-performing teams through human-centric approaches. Welcome to the podcast, John. I'd love for you to share your journey into technology leadership and what led you to be a co-founder for Human Centric Engineering.
Thanks for that lovely intro. Yeah, I mean, God, my journey goes way back, I suppose, all the way back to the early 80s, which is thinking back is a long time ago. But I got into, I'd been about 12 when I got my first sort of home computer, a ZX81 that had 1K of memory, and the only way that you could do anything with these devices was to program them yourself. So you'd copy like lines of code maybe from a computer magazine that would be for a game that you could play.
Mhm.
So by today's standards, and what kids can engage with nowadays, it would be so primitive. But to me, it was this thing of being able to have an idea and then bring it to life through your own efforts and share it with your mates and say, "Look, I've made this game." So that to me was just it was like magic. Um, so I guess then I got quite deeply into that and quite obsessive and tried to sort of commercially write games for companies, which was the thing back then. I didn't really have any guidance and I didn't really have any success at that, but I learned a lot through doing it. And what I learned was that I could learn things.
Mhm.
I could learn how to code and do that all myself. Now, when I went to uh, university and went in a career path. I did go into a career in IT initially, but that was on the commercial side, that was on the sales side.
Okay.
So that was, I guess, where the money was in the sort of dot-com boom.
Yeah.
And but when the web came, when the web was a thing, I started playing around with that and creating websites, and that just led on to this whole sense of rediscovering that thing that I was doing with the gaming again, and realize that you can create your own websites and indulge your own creativity. So I kind of self-taught really myself how to, about databases and about the different coding approaches, and sort of learned myself. And through various things, I found my way into a role as a developer. And but because I'd had commercial experience and because I had also done other things where I'd have been leading teams and managing people before,
Mhm.
it was quite an easy transition for me to kind of go from being a developer to then leading teams and then leading departments.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's my journey.
Oh, fantastic. And then thinking about human-centric engineering, yeah, what led you to co-found that?
So when I was managing teams, it was never really about the code. I only ever saw myself as a mediocre developer. I could make things work. I could make things happen.
Yeah.
But it's really what interested me more than anything was how engineers worked together
Okay.
and the different struggles and challenges that they had in communicating and delivering as a team. And I was fortunate that I'd sort of studied quite a lot of psychology and sociology and philosophy and these kind of practices. So I was really interested in these aspects of how people come together in an organization and and also have a view of work that,
Mhm.
like I was mentioning, how much I enjoyed coding games when I was a kid. And I think that work in itself should be fulfilling, it should be rewarding, it should mean something to people.
Mhm.
It should be work is a place where we're not just delivering stuff and doing our obligations, but we're also growing, we're challenging ourselves, we're challenging each other, we're encouraging each other, we're learning how to interact with each other and overcome those sort of social obstacles. And that's what I see engineers struggling with quite a lot. And so I enjoy sort of bringing different perspectives and angles to sort of support and encourage engineers in that area.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I mean, our work together, I think when we start to talk about that in more tangible terms, it was quite profound, right? Some of the surveys that you ran, some of the insights and the trends that you found. And I think one of the things that really resonated with me was the dependency matrix, where you highlighted through all your data and your surveys that actually there's such dependencies between teams that that can affect your flow. And I think one of the things you talked about with me, John, when we engaged together was the concept of flow. So yeah, it'd be great if you could just yeah touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's these it's like the independent we look at software engineers and we look at their, I don't know, their capability as an individual, and we often overemphasize, we do performance reviews and we overemphasize that individual and how they're performing and how they're growing and all the rest of it. But the multiplier or the divider is the connections between people and
Yes.
how work, how learning and interactions and productive work um, changes hands between people and is exchanged between people and everything that goes along with that. So yeah, we put quite a lot of attention on that relational side of things,
Hmm.
because ultimately that we're trying to sort of encourage the fast flow of change.
Yes.
Bringing out new features to deliver to customers in times that in a way that's expected,
Mm.
in a high performant way. And the thing that slows down that flow is often the handing over work and the communication, the misunderstandings, the lack of ownership,
Yeah.
all of those barriers that sort of get into the way and cause confusion and muddles and bring out the sort of human emotions. The
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
makes it turns work from that joyful creativity that I was talking about to sometimes can be sort of manual drudgery
Yes.
and that. So it's sort of highlighting the areas that and the constraints that can slow things down there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I definitely gave you an interesting challenge by putting hardware, firmware, and software in the mix of it all. So that was
Yeah, you
that
had
was
a
fun.
really interesting environment. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Such complexity,
Yeah.
and so difficult for people to understand unless you're in it. And I
Yes.
think we we try to our approach is all about trying to help people to make sense of their own experiences rather than through sort of questions and insights and reflecting things back,
Hmm.
rather than being kind of prescriptive about how things should be,
Yes. Yeah.
because you're always the experts in your domain. It's just that a different perspective then gives you a different a conversation that you can have internally about, okay, we didn't see this aspect, so okay, let's look at how we can overcome that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a complex living being, isn't it? These the whole organization is, and it gets a little bit even more complicated with technologists. So yeah, really interesting. So John, I'm going to
Yeah,
think about
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
yeah, sorry, maybe we're cutting out there. Sorry. So your experience with HCE. So I'm just thinking about some of the actionable improvements that you made with us. How did you approach making these insights practical for leaders? So, thinking about all the suggestions you put forward for me and my team as I engage with HCE. Yeah, can you talk our audience through what were some of the actionable things that you put forward in that engagement?
So what our approach is to do sort of quite well structured surveys that look at the experience of engineers from the organizational level and from the team level, but also with their own sort of personal individual level.
Hmm.
And and then we'll sort of elaborate on that through doing one-to-one interviews with engineers that really kind of brings out the stories and experiences around the data that we've collected.
Hmm.
And then we kind of do like a thematic analysis. We look for patterns and trends
Hmm.
and echo them back to the people that we're working with. And my colleague Simon and I have we we've got quite a good knack of being able to converse with each other in a way that with all of this data that allows us to then we then try to look at priorities from an understanding of what it is that you're seeing and that you're looking to achieve, and then being able to find the sort of lowest hanging fruit and the sort of easy wins, as well as the long term sort of strategic changes that that you could make. And we try to do that in a way that, again, it's not prescriptive. It's like, you know, your business better than us. It's We try to do it in a way that is honestly reflecting the landscape, so that you can work on creating the kind of conditions for people to be successful.
Hmm.
So we take that attitude. It's it's rather than sort of highlighting points of intervention, it's more about thinking about the whole sort of landscape of the team
Yeah.
and what it's like from the experience of the people working in that landscape, and how those people can kind of follow the path of least resistance, and how you can make it easier for them to
Yeah.
be successful through structure, through stories, through a number of different ways of looking at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And John, one of the things that I was also involved with after our engagement was a cohort of people that you were working with across different organizations. I'd love for you to really share some of the trends that you're seeing between companies as you're looking at some of these problem statements. That would be really useful, I think.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I think that I mean, every company is different in terms of how they are structured and the things that they prioritize and the pressures that they're under. But some of the really big trends are things like complexity. The world is getting much more complex.
Hmm.
AI has been such a curveball, and people are still not knowing what to do with it, and it's changing everything in terms of people's experience of work and their fears and their concerns. And so you've got yeah, we've done a number of other sort of studies across different people in different companies to sort of find some of those patterns and reveal what they are. But some of the commonalities really are that sort of that organizational culture,
Hmm.
team culture, team well-being. I mean, the kind of things that the kind of conditions for human thriving always come out, but with this acknowledgement that they're really hard to. There's no secret recipe.
Hmm.
People have kind of their own approaches, that their own sort of home-baked approaches that they use. And there's a lot of tools, and tools can be like used and misused.
Yes, yes.
and 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 the other thing that really comes through is really heavily is things like trust.
Hmm.
It's kind of for example, when I was working with you, something that came through was that yes, you're dealing with a lot of complexity, but there's also a lot of trust between people that have been built up through the years.
Hmm.
And with you've got a foundation of trust, then you can work through those challenges
Hmm.
together.
Hmm.
And I think that we are living in times at the moment where people don't trust politicians, they don't trust companies. We're living in this kind of like low trust world.
Hmm.
So if leaders that can kind of carve out a sense of trust between people and themselves and their sort of horizontal teams, I think that really makes a difference.
Yeah, I absolutely resonate with that sentiment as well. Yeah, trust is foundational. Without that, I think you're superficially moving forward in a number of different directions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, John, we're going to take a slight pivot into your world a bit more. So,
Mhm.
looking back at your time leading the engineering teams, what's one moment you felt most proud of?
Um, I think really that I was always able to be myself
Mhm.
and um, share my um, struggles and goals and challenges and all of those sorts of things with the people that I'm working with. So it was never a case of me sort of knowing everything and sort of imposing things from above. It was always a case of um, how do we together develop a kind of leadership attitude?
Mhm.
So by that I mean, people not having to ask permission to kind of like see things and get things done. Um, Certainly, like communicating with each other what's going on and
Yeah.
having this kind of shared view of the world, but almost like kind of like tackling the challenges together as
Mhm.
companions rather than companions with different responsibilities.
Mhm.
Um, so my thing was always, well, how do I kind of create the conditions where someone feels like they can take the lead?
Yeah.
Not necessarily because they're the most senior, but because they have the right context at that time and that they have the ability to deal with a certain thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's something that, and again, that takes the pressure off the manager. If you've
Yeah.
got um, a team of people that feels that they can take responsibility and take and know the boundaries in terms of decision making and knowing when to ask for extra context if they haven't got it, or and knowing that they can try things without failing.
Mhm.
So it's just that, and that again, I think builds on trust. It doesn't happen straight away. You can't, you've got to get there over time.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. Okay, so opposite to that, John, what's been one of the toughest leadership challenges you faced, and what did you learn about sustainable leadership from that?
I think I think in general, I think it's when you're when you're responsible for managing a team, you're also responsible for reporting upwards and delivering a strategy. And
Yes.
sometimes you find yourself caught in the middle. You're um, you're wanting to create the right conditions and the right kind of level of agency and autonomy within your team, but you've also got pressures that from elsewhere, and some of those pressures they're hard to talk about with your team because some might be confidential or controversial. So how do you um, so you don't have to be completely transparent with everybody, but if you've got that trust, then they're trusting that where you're going is in their best interests. So but then equally there's also this thing of the wider executive team doesn't necessarily understand the challenges that engineering faces.
Hmm.
So how do you communicate that in non-technical terms, like without making excuses? Um, so showing what it's really like for the engineering teams to work through their complexities,
Yes.
but without kind of hiding from the challenge of doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's the path to burnout. If
Yeah.
for a lot of leaders that are stuck in the middle, if you can't navigate those tensions,
Yeah.
you find that you take it all on yourself because you're
Yeah.
trying, and again, trying to protect your team is another sort of red flag that you can't always shield your team are adults
Hmm.
and they don't need protecting.
No.
So how do you work together as adults
Yes.
around this sort of shared challenge?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's
so
a
you, I don't
yeah.
know if you relate to some of that.
Yeah, there's absolutely a fine balance, right? And you're right. I think in terms of, kind of business strategy, 3-year plans, OKRs, etc. And then the OKRs don't really take account of technical debt sometimes, or non-functional requirements, or something that comes left field. And therefore, yeah, it's really difficult to one, ask the team to pivot if we need to, because something new's come on the horizon, or equally explaining to your exec peers that no, it's actually going to take a year now. It's not going to be the 3 month
Yeah.
estimate that we originally said. So absolutely, there is a fine balance.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting work that's been done by Ian McGilchrist,
Hmm.
he's a psychiatrist that's done a lot of research on the brain and specifically the hemispherical
Hmm.
sides of the brain. So I think you're familiar with some of that, but
Yeah.
it's like it's like you're as a leader in the middle of everything, you need to have that sort of right side brain that's kind of like looking at the horizon and looking at opportunities and threats at the big picture stuff,
Yes.
as well as the left side brain that's looking at the fine detail and keeping everything in check.
Hmm.
And so engineers are like stereotypically more likely to be looking at the detail and not
Yeah.
aware of some of the kind of wider things that are going on. So how do you communicate that to them in a way that's meaningful?
Yes.
And by that, I don't mean to be patronising because like engineers are the smartest people,
Yeah.
really really clever people
Absolutely.
that really do get it. So so it's not talking to them in a patronising way, but in an
No.
honest
No.
way of facing the challenges together.
Yeah, and actually, you're right, John. I think having been a developer myself, my intention was always to solve problems, right? And actually, what are you trying to solve? And as engineers, we're like the most helpful people, in the world because actually, if you understood the problem you're trying to solve, yeah, I think it's describing problem statements, not telling people what to do or and context. I think problems and context are so important when you're working with
Yeah.
the engineering team.
It,
Yeah.
and it's so easy for us to talk about this in a conversation like away from the
Yes.
field of
Yes.
but when you're actually in it and you're under
Yeah.
pressure and you've got meeting after meeting after meeting and so it's all very well to talk like this and
Yeah.
be quite textbook about it, but
Hmm.
then it's kind of consistently implementing that. And if you're burnt out as a manager or you've got other things going on, you're human too. And
Absolutely. And we
um,
haven't even touched on cognitive load or context switching today. But that's
yeah.
something that you're also balancing as a leader as well, right?
Yeah, and I think that having escape valves and looking after yourself first, keeping
Hmm.
healthy, eating
Yeah.
right, sleeping well, and all of
Hmm.
that, all the basic stuff is,
Yes.
um, you know, you won't find it in an opening paragraph of a textbook about engineering, but I think that's some of the most important stuff.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And which actually leads me on to kind of team sustainability. How do you spot the early warning signs that an engineering team is struggling or what help brings them back on track?
So again, I think um, there's no team is the same, so it's really hard to kind of generalize. And
Yeah.
like the idea of a team is like the individual, the whole should be greater than the individual parts combined. As a
Hmm.
team, that's the point of a team. Otherwise, you might as well just have individuals working together on separate things. And often that's what happens. People are put into teams rather than and the team just doesn't have the right dynamics or doesn't have the right composition or doesn't have the right direction, the right communication protocols, the right ownership levels, and all of that kind of thing. So there's a we often again we look at the individuals in a team and assess them rather than looking at the context that the team is working in,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so many factors that can influence whether a team is doing well or not.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the people in the team are the ones that know,
Yeah.
and that's where you go. That's where you go to find out from their own sort of experience. Are they able to make sense of the business? Are they able to do they know what's expected? Does everyone are they coherent and have the same picture of what's expected, or are there differences there? And again, like engineers, as you mentioned, will be, they want to do a good job. They want to do so. One person will be burning themselves out and
Mm.
running around trying to keep everything going.
Yeah.
And it's it, so it's really complex, but also it's quite simple. And the simple thing is kind of like talking to teams,
Yes. Yeah.
finding out finding out what it's really like. Have they got a sense that they can be autonomous and make the right kind of improvements themselves? Are they sort of doing this team reflexivity thing where they're kind of like looking at how they're doing and actually talking about it,
Hmm.
and rather than just heads down all the time and just trying to churn out work?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for a leader in any situation, it's like not necessarily taking the team and giving them direction, but giving them the helping them develop the capability to know like who they are, how they're working, where they're going,
Yeah.
all of those sort of subtle things.
No, absolutely. And it is nuanced, as you say, John. It's not one size fits all. So that's such an important point. Which actually leads me on to leaders. So for tech leaders listening to this, who want to create a healthier, more resilient team, what's one step you think they could take and start with this week?
So I'm really into my health and fitness, and I have been for I don't know, like 35 years. So and I think that you can look at your own personal health, and you can also look at how you know how you can become healthy and resilient yourself, and how that maps on to sort of working life and life in teams. And um, one of the fundamental things I think that affects a person's health is whether they're kind of living authentically, whether they're living in their own truth. And by that I mean, it's all sort of nervous system stuff. It's if you feel if you feel you're in an environment you're um, where you're relaxed, where you're not stressed out all the time, where your parasympathetic nervous system is engaged rather than your sympathetic nervous system. So you feel like you don't have to pretend. You can be yourself. And by that, I don't mean that you can just turn up and not be professional. What I mean is that you can have an honest conversation with your teammates and with your managers and that kind of thing, so that your digestive system's working well, you're not tensed up and feeling tight. Your nervous system is relaxed. Your cognitive function is then going to function.
Yes,
um,
yes.
so yeah, I think it's just being able to sort of sense to yourself: am I living in truth? Do I feel like I can speak honestly to my colleagues, or am I having to constantly act and perform and feel stressed all the time?
Really good.
And
Yeah.
and I Yeah, I just think it's so important that you look after your health first, and even going for a walk, or instead of having a meeting in an office, going for a walk and talk, or
Yeah.
because that just engages a different sense of your brain is in a different state. Then
Yeah.
you'll look you're more expansive,
Hmm.
you're more receptive.
Yeah.
You're not distracted by what's going on your phone or in the office. You're out in nature, that kind of thing. So yeah, simple things like that.
Absolutely. Authenticity and nature, right? I think two great pillars there. Which was actually going to lead me on to my final question, which was, what's one simple practice you follow to stay sustainable as a leader?
Well, it carries on from that really. It's physical exercise. So lunchtime today, I've just done my burpees, and made sure I got that in. And um, you're when you're physically active, you, your brain is releasing a growth hormone called brain-derived neutropic factor (BDNF), and BDNF is required in order to do neurogenesis, to create new brain cells,
Yeah.
and is also creates the conditions for new brain connections. And I think that often engineers just see their physical body as a kind of like a transport mechanism for their brain. They prioritize their brain, but not realizing the brain body connection, and that we're all sort of one organism, and that if you don't look after your health physically, if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not eating well, your brain function is not going to be there. You're going to feel foggy. You're not going to find the clarity. You're going to struggle. So yeah,
So important.
and as a leader, there's getting out into the sort of natural rhythms of nature, and enjoying getting out of breath and challenging yourself, and having that release mechanism. For me, I there's no problem. I think it was the philosopher Nietzsche that said, "Never trust an idea that you had indoors," because you're just not as creative or receptive to things there. You've got to get outside and kind of get sweaty, get dirty, and appreciate life in all of its fullness.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, John. So expansive as well. So yeah, I really appreciate that. So John, I think that's the end of our discussion today. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast, and I think some of the things that you just shared with the audience really profound. To follow John, he is part of Human Centric Engineering. So please do reach out to him for more insights. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you for having me, Mita.